there's definitely something Buddhist there about appreciating the moment and staying within the moment. And
yeah, yeah, and that doesn't mean that you have to be. Oh, sometimes I worry about that phrase because it's like then you don't appreciate or you don't take the responsibility for your actions because all you're doing is living in the moment. Who cares what happens, what you've heard, who you've heard, or what you're going to do, or what your future is. And I think you can appreciate and live in the moment and still have an appreciation for what this might mean to you or the people that you're reacting with.
Absolutely.
Again, it's convenient to take the shorthand view and say, I live in the moment only. Yeah, don't bother me with that information.
How much does that play into your blacksmithing, being there and getting lost in your art or blacksmith, in blacksmithing and anything where you kind of focus? I remember growing up and I did a lot of pencil drawing and studied with a lot of artists, and I would sit down with a pad of paper and pencils and colors and get lost, look up, and an hour has gone by without.
There's that unit of time again, which is false. What is an hour? It's one circle of the hand on the clock. It's one portion of a revolution. It doesn't mean anything really. It's kind of a little bit like money. If you take a dollar bill and you tack it to a tree, what value is it? We call it important because we assign a value to it. But nature doesn't care. The tree doesn't care. It's probably saying, ouch, what do you tack this dollar bill for? Eventually it'll shred, and a squirrel might say, oh, this thing is good in my nest, or a bird might, but it doesn't. It has no intrinsic value, really. Neither does time, other than the fact that we're getting older. How many more seconds closer to being dead? But in here, I can't really get lost because I've got work to do. I've got to, if a visitor comes in, I always have to be aware that I may have a visitor, and there's that job to do. Smithing, by its nature, because of the risk, you can't fully just get lost in it. You have to always maintain some connectedness to the potential risks. I've had other risky jobs, high steel work, ride motorcycles. You can't totally just lose yourself in it because that's when you lose.
A bit of a safety concern there.
Yes, yeah, but that's part of the environment. So if you incorporate that into what you're doing, then that's as much a part of the enjoyment because it's an aspect of the environment.
Absolutely.
Same with woodworking. Every power tool I have, every tool I have, is a tiger waiting to have a lunch. And it could be my fingers or any part of my anatomy if I'm not careful. So bearing that in mind, then you're free to explore, but with those reservations always.
Those little caveats before you actually get to the good stuff.
Yeah. And those are the things that you have to become comfortable with before you can really get to the good stuff. Before I could become comfortable on my bike, I had to accept the fact that, some people call them death machines, and there's a reason for that. But you have to at least acknowledge that fact before you can really then begin to experience the bike in its full capacity. When I was rigging on high steel, same thing. Early on, I had a lot of dreams about falling and death. I had to incorporate that into me, that every day I go to work, that was a reality. And since I was a crew supervisor, I had to be my people I told to go do something that was could happen to them as well. So I had a responsibility for that. All that I had to begin to understand and take on before I could truly become good at what I was doing. Otherwise, I was busy thinking about those other things. And then that can trip you up. So it's a balancing act, I guess.
I certainly know people who enjoy woodworking or enjoy this or that, but as a professional, there's definitely that you have to be efficient. You have to,
It depends. Depends upon what you're after. I've had several people ask me, as far as blacksmithing, well, can you make a living at it? It's like, well, define what you mean by living. How much, yes, you're right, except you only have to be efficient if you have to earn so much per hour. If you turn it into that, then yes, you do. And a jig would be really nice because I can make the same dovetail every time and just zip through them. I'm not sure if that's woodworking anymore. That's one thing I worry about and why I'm very cautious. I have a lathe duplicator, but I rarely use it because I'm not turning anymore. I'm turning, but it's the machine's doing the work, not me. And so I've done most of my duplication work for customers by hand, just by hand and a pair of calipers. Because then it's truly me. Now, am I getting paid what I'm worth per hour? No, not really. But it's mine. It's not the duplicators. And so, and I only have to earn as much as I want to spend. So this is kind of a knock on capitalism, but I really don't need that much money because I'm not going to spend that much money. So how much do I really need? How much do I really need to earn? That's one of the problems with going into business with something that you love, because I knew when I considered woodworking businesses in the past, it's come and gone. It's something I haven't really truly attacked fully. It's always been a sidelight more than it has been my primary business. And there was a story about two woodworkers I read about that they got into the business and it just got worse and worse and worse. And every time they were successful, the worse it got, because by the time, after about 3 or 4 years, they needed to be generating somewhere on the order of $2,000 a week to keep them and their staff occupied. And it just kept going. And there was an ad on TV not too long ago from some company, and the guy comes out of the office. He's got sheets of paper with him, and he goes over to the guy who's working, and the ad builds tension into it, because as everybody knows, this is the accountant, and he's got this worried look on his face. So as he passes each of the workers in this small production shop, they look up from their tasks, and they look worried because he's obviously worried. He goes over to the owner who's working, sanding on something. He says, take a look at these figures, and they compare them. He says, you know what this means? And the guy says, no, what? He says, well, that means we're going to have to add more. And the owner turns to him and he says, well, isn't that the point? And I used to get mad at that ad, because it's like, no, not really, not all the time. It doesn't have to be the point. You have to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger. We think that's what it's all about, but it's not. So I don't know. To me, if you lost love for it, if it's just become a point of making money, then you've lost what the point was. That you're just, yeah, fine, we'll sell donuts.
There can be a love in selling donuts.
I was in Ireland a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and there's this woman selling donuts at a little stand. It was a little cubicle. Thing couldn't have been more than, geez, maybe 6 or 8 feet on the side. And she had a little broiler in there, or a little fat thing, and she was making these donuts. They were about that big. And she had plain ones, sugar-covered ones, and chocolate-covered. And she had this stainless steel rod. It looked like a conductor's baton. And she would stand there, and if you ordered donuts, she could just take those donuts with this wand. She had the bag open, and she's holding it by the bottom. This is in Dublin. And she's just flipping those donuts in an arch right in that bag. She never wasn't even looking. She was just doing it, and never missed nothing. And it was just so smooth, and so she was the donut lady. I mean,
she was one with the action.
Yeah. It was really kind of cool. I don't know if she liked it, disliked it. I never really got to ask her what her opinion of it was, but she was so smooth with it. And she just knew her tools and her everything. She'd just obviously done it a million times. But there's the idea that, yeah, you can sit there on a street corner with a little booth about the size of a good-sized closet, a small closet, and she's making a living making donuts by hand, one, and then so on. It's like, oh, this is kind of cool. So you don't need a huge factory and 100 workers or 1,000 workers and all this other stuff.
One person out in the sun having a nice day.
Yeah.
Making donuts.
Yeah, exactly. Making donuts. It's like, that's cool. Imagine when she gets done at night, she locks up, turns everything off, locks it up, and goes home. Life's good.